The gavel struck the stone table 3 times, and the sound echoed through the great hall like a death bell. I stood alone at the low platform in the center of the room, my hands folded behind my back, my uniform pressed sharp. 12 alien faces looked down at me from the high seats above. They were not kind faces. They had never been kind, not really. But today they were something worse than unkind. Today, they were finished with us. My name is Eli Brandt, and I was the last human voice the Galactic Concord ever agreed to hear. I had flown 18 days across. 3 systems to stand in this chamber on the Sari Prime. I had not slept. More than 4 hours any night of that journey. My throat was dry. My heart was steady. I already knew what they were going to say before the high speaker opened his long grey mouth. "Human delegate," he said. His voice was smooth as oil and just as cold. "The Concord has reached its decision." I did not nod. I did not bow. I only looked at him straight and level, the way my father taught me to look at men who were about to lie. "For 300 years, the High Speaker went on, your species has been granted the honor of walking among the stars with the elder races. You have been given trade rights. You have been given protected space. You have been given a seat at the outer ring of this Concord. And in return you have brought disorder. You have brought unrest. You have bred faster than permitted. You have pushed into regions that were closed to you. You have formed bonds with lesser client species that were not yours to befriend." I felt my jaw tighten. I kept my face still. "The vote has been cast," he said. 9 in favor, 3 against. "Humanity is hereby removed from Concord membership. Humanity is hereby barred from all shared space beyond the Sol cluster. You will have 400 standard days to withdraw every ship, every citizen, every outpost, and every tool of human make from Concord territory. After that day, any human vessel found outside your home cluster will be considered a hostile intruder." There was a long silence. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the soft hum of the Chamasold air system. I could hear somewhere, far above me in the galleries, the quiet laughter of a Vihari noble who had waited a long time for this moment. The High Speaker leaned forward. "Do you understand the ruling human?" I took one slow breath. Then I spoke and my voice did not shake. "I understand it. Do you accept it?" "I am not here to accept or refuse. I said I am here to carry your words home. My people will decide what to do with them." A ripple passed through the seated council. They had expected me to beg. They had expected me to argue, to plead, to threaten, to weep. Some of the younger humans in my own delegation had wanted me to do exactly that. But I had been told by my mother long ago that when a man is standing in front of a wall, the worst thing he can do is pound his fists against it. Walls do not care about fists. Walls care only about the quiet tools that go around them or under them. So I did not pound. I only turned and I walked out of that chamber, with my back straight and my hands still folded behind me. I did not look at the Vari. I did not look at the Aloni. I did not look at the Tesh who had hated us longest of all. I walked out into the pale blue sun of the Sari Prime, and I got onto my ship, and I sent a Singlecoated message home. The message was 3 words. "It is done." The journey back to Earth took 21 days. I spent most of it alone in my cabin reading old reports and drinking weak tea. I expected to feel angry. I was surprised instead to feel something like relief. For my whole life, I had watched my people fold themselves into smaller and smaller shapes to fit into rooms that were never built for them. We had been told not to build certain engines. We had been told not to study certain sciences. We had been told to slow our birth rate, to close our factories, to let other species lead the frontier missions because our style was too forward. And we had done all of it. We had bowed and we had smiled and we had said, "Yes, yes. We will fit ourselves to your rules." And now, at last, the rules were being taken away. Not by us, by them. When I landed at the main spaceport outside Geneva, I expected to find crowds. I expected to see angry signs and shouting voices, and news drones hanging in the air like flies. But the streets were quiet. People were going to work. Children were walking to school. A woman was selling warm bread from a small cart near the transit gate, and she waved at me as I passed. I stopped. I asked her if she had heard the news. She smiled. It was a small, tight smile. "We heard it this morning, sir." And nothing, sir. The bread still needs to be sold." I stared at her for a long moment. Then I laughed. A real laugh, the first one I had laughed in months. I bought a loaf of her bread, and I walked the rest of the way home on foot. My mother was waiting for me on the porch of our old house in the hills. She was 78 years old, and she had built ships for 40 of those years. Before she retired, she stood up when she saw me, and she walked down the stone path and she took my face in both her rough hands. "You did well, Eli," she said. "I did nothing," I said. "I stood there and I took it. That is what doing well looked like today." I shook my head. "Mother, they have thrown us out. They have taken everything. 3 centuries of work of trade, of mapping their space and building their stations. Gone. We have 1 year to pull back behind the soul gate and never come out again." She looked at me with her pale grey eyes and she smiled. It was not a sad smile. It was not a bitter smile. It was the smile of a woman who has been waiting a very long time for something to finally happen. "Good," she said. I blinked. "Good. Good," she said again. "Now we can finally build what we have been holding back." I did not understand her then. I thought she was tired or that she was trying to comfort me with strange words. I kissed her forehead and I went inside and I slept for 14 hours straight, for the first time in a year. But that night I dreamed of doors closing, great heavy doors made of something stronger than metal swinging, shut one after another, sealing off a long hallway. And behind each closing door, I could hear something breathing, something that had been sleeping for a very long time, something that was just beginning now to wake up. I did not know it yet, sitting there in the dark of my childhood bedroom. But my mother's words were not the words of an old woman giving comfort. They were the words of an engineer who had seen this day coming since before I was born. They were the words of a species that had been listening quietly for 300 years to every rule it was given and writing each one down and studying each one and finding the exact shape of the cage. And now at last the cage was being opened from the wrong side. The conquered thought they had punished a child. They thought they had swept a difficult guest out of their parlor and bolted the door. They thought the story was over. The story had not yet begun. In the morning, my orders came through on the quiet channel. I was being pulled off the diplomatic track and reassigned. The message was short and it did not explain itself. But I knew the voice of the man who had written it. He was an old friend from the academy and he worked in a place most people did not know existed. The message said only this: "Come to the UIT station. Bring nothing. Tell no one. There is work to do." I packed a small bag. I kissed my mother goodbye. I did not look back at the house as my transport lifted off because I somehow already knew deep in my bones that the next time I saw that porch, I would not be the same man standing on it. The withdrawal had begun. The order to withdraw went out to every human colony, every human ship, every human outpost in conquered space on the same morning. I was not in Geneva when it happened. By then, I was already at the UIT station, a place that, according to every public map of the solar system, did not exist. It sat far out beyond the orbit of the last cold world, hidden inside a hollowed piece of rock the size of a small mountain. The only way to reach it was to know it was there. The man who greeted me at the docking bay was called Henry Ashford, and he had been my instructor at the academy 20 years before. He was thinner now and his hair was fully white, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, awake, amused by something only he understood. "Eli," he said, shaking my hand. "Welcome to the quiet room." "The what?" "You will see." He walked me through 3 sealed doors, each one requiring a different kind of check, a handprint, a voice phrase. And, at the last door, a long look into a small blue lens that I think reads something deeper than my face. When the final door opened, I stepped into a hall that stretched further than I thought the asteroid could hold. It was full of people, engineers, physicists, doctors, builders, all working quietly and steadily on things I could not at first make sense of. I saw a woman standing at a large clear wall, drawing lines of light on it with her fingers. The lines formed the shape of a ship, but the ship had no visible drive. I saw two men arguing softly over a small black cube that seemed to bend the light around it. I saw a room through a glass partition full of what looked like sleeping children in soft blue tanks, except the children were not children, and I was not sure they were sleeping. Henry watched my face as I took it all in. "You are wondering," he said, "how long this has been here?" "Yes, 260 years. I stopped walking. "Eli," he said gently, "come sit. I will tell you the story your history books did not tell you, and then I will tell you what you are going to do about it." He took me to a small room with 2 chairs and a pot of real coffee, the kind grown in the mountains of old Earth, not the fast kind made from protein paste. He poured me a cup. He sat down across from me, and he began to speak. He told me that when humans had first entered conquered space 300 years ago, we had been eager. We had been new. We had wanted so badly to be accepted that we had agreed to almost every rule they put in front of us. Slow down our ship drives, they said. Agreed. Do not build thinking machines past a certain level, they said. Agreed. Do not research the folding of space, they said. Agreed. Do not breed past a certain rate. Agreed. Do not live past a certain age, they said, because longer lives would strain shared resources. Agreed. We had agreed publicly to all of it, and then quietly in rooms like this one, we had disagreed. We never stopped, Eli. Henry said. Not one of those lines of research, we only hid them. Every time the conquered banned a science, we moved it underground. Every time they said no, we said yes, but in whispers. For 3 centuries. We have been building in the dark the very things they told us we could not have. I put my cup down. My hands were not quite steady. Why? I asked. Why did we not push back openly? Why did we hide? He smiled. Because we are a patient species, though we do not look it. Because the men and women who started this program understood something that the conqueror did not. They understood that a cage is only useful if the bird believes in it. And our leaders long ago decided not to believe. And now, he said, the bird has been pushed out of the cage by the hand that built it. We have been ordered to leave. We have been ordered to close our borders and vanish. Do you understand, Eli, what they have just given us? I did not answer. I was beginning to understand, but I wanted to hear him say it. They have given us, he said, permission to finally come out of the dark. That night, I could not sleep. I walked the halls of the UIT station, looking through windows into labs and workshops I had never imagined could exist. I saw engines that folded space the way a hand folds paper. I saw medical systems that could regrow a human arm in 6 days. I saw grain patterns locked and sealed, vaults that could feed a planet for a year from a single field. I saw thinking machines, calm and slow and gentle, that spoke in soft voices, and called the scientists by their first names as if they were old friends. 300 years of hidden work. 300 years of quiet patience. 300 years of nodding along to rules we had already decided to outgrow. And now we were going to use it all. My new orders came the next morning. I was being placed in charge of the Kepler corridor evacuation. 42 human colonies spread across a long thin stretch of space, holding almost 20 million people. My job was to pull every one of them home before the 400-day deadline. Snorts, but that was only the visible part of the job. The hidden part, the part that no other species was to ever hear about, was different. We were not just evacuating, we were stripping. Every station we had ever built in conquered space was human design, human metal, human thought. Every relay, every orbital ring, every weather grid, every farming tower. We had built all of it, and we were going to take all of it back. Not destroy it, take it. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, plate by plate. 300 years of infrastructure, quietly packed up and loaded onto transport. Ships and sent home. The conquered would not stop us. They had ordered us to remove every tool of human make. They had written it into their own ruling. They had not understood what that really meant. I flew out to the Kepler corridor with a fleet of 2,000 transport ships and a quiet smile on my face. The first colony I reached was a small farming world called Harlow's Reach. The people there had been told what was coming. They were ready. They met me on the landing field, and their leader, a broad woman named me Foster, shook my hand and handed me a list. Every piece of human equipment on the planet top to bottom. Every tractor, every water pump, every solar panel, every medical bed, every piece of wiring in every wall. All of it, sir? She asked. All of it, I said. She nodded once firmly and turned to her people. You heard the commander begin the pull. For the next 12 days, Harlow's Reach was taken apart. The humans worked in long, steady shifts, dismantling their own world with the same care they had used to build it. The fields were stripped of their machines. The houses were emptied of their systems. The weather stations were pulled down from the hills. Even the water pipes were cut, coiled, and loaded into crates. On the 10th day, a conquered observer ship came to watch us. It hung in orbit, blinking its cold lights. Its captain, an Ohlone officer in a grey sash, hailed me on an open channel. Commander Brandt, she said in that careful way the Ohlone had. You appear to be removing more than your ruling requires. Farm machines were not listed among the compliance items. They are human-made, I said. They are rooted in your client colony. They could be left for the incoming population. I smiled into the camera. The conquered ruling was clear, Captain. Every tool of human make. We are being thorough. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, Very well, Commander. And she signed off. On the 13th day, the last transport lifted from Harlow's Reach. I stood on the ramp of my command ship and looked down at the empty world. The houses were still there. The roads were still there. The shape of what we had built was still visible, like the outline of a body under a blanket. But everything that had made it work, every living system, every engine and pump and wire was gone. The fields were going brown already. The weather without the grids was beginning to turn. I felt a strange pinch in my chest. Me Foster stood beside me. She felt it too. I could see it on her face. They will not be able to hold this world, she said quietly. No, I said. They will not. Good, she said. And we lifted off. Over the next 10 months, I watched the same thing happen 42 times. Every colony we left behind was stripped clean of human work. The elder races had always praised us for how clever we were with infrastructure. They had never asked how much of their own new territory was built on top of ours. Now they were finding out one dying world at a time. On some worlds, the pull was harder. On a place called New Logos, a young engineer named Clara Diaz wept as she pulled the central control rod out of the planetary weather grid. She had designed that grid herself 12 years before. She told me as we rode the lift back up to the transport that within a month the storms would return to the equator, and within a year the ice would come back to the northern belt. I asked her if she wanted to leave one small part of it behind just to spare the incoming Ohlone settlers some of the worst weather. She looked at me with red eyes and she said, Sir, they voted to throw us out. They can have the planet. They cannot have my work. I did not argue. I carried her control rod home myself. By the end of the 10th month, the conquered began to understand what was happening. Their news channels, which I could watch from my command ship through a slow deep link, began to fill with worried voices. Food shortages on Harlow's Reach, storm damage on New Logos, power failures on 7 other human-built colonies, old relay stations going dark one by one. The Ohlone High Counselor gave a long angry speech about human spite. The Vari Senate demanded that we leave at least the basic utilities in place. The Tesh said nothing, but their warships began to shadow our transports more closely. But the ruling was the ruling. They had written it themselves. Every tool of human make. Withdraw, comply, leave. We were leaving. On the 398th day, I stood on the bridge of my flagship, the last human vessel still inside conquered space. Below me on the screen, the final transport was lifting from the last human station. A long, thin relay tower called Ashwell Point. It had been built 240 years ago. It had carried messages across half the galaxy. And now it was a cold, empty needle hanging in the dark. My communications officer, a young woman named Alice Whitmore, turned in her seat. "Sir, conquered hail ambassador level. Put it through." The face of the high speaker appeared on the main screen. Older now, grayer, a little less smooth. "Commander Brandt," he said, "humanity has complied. The galaxy will remember your dignity in this difficult withdrawal." I looked at him for a long moment. I did not smile. I did not frown. I only spoke. "The galaxy will remember something." "High speaker," I said, "but it will not be that." And I cut the channel. We crossed the last border of conquered space 6 hours later, and we did not slow down until the light of our own sun grew warm and yellow on the hull of the ship. Home was waiting, and home had been busy. The last human ship came home on the morning of day 400, and by evening of that same day we closed the gate. I was there when it happened. They had wanted me on the council platform because I had been the one who carried the conquered, ruling home, and they said it was fitting that I also be there when the door was shut behind us. I did not feel fitting. I felt small. I stood at the edge of the platform in a clean dress uniform, and I watched a gathering of scientists and engineers do something no species had ever done before on purpose. The Soulgate was the oldest wormhole anchor in human space. It had been built 290 years ago, back when we were young and eager, and it had been our main doorway to the rest of the galaxy ever since. Every ship that had ever left our home cluster had passed through it. Every message, every trader, every visitor, every friend. It was a ring of dark metal and pale light for kilometers across, hanging in orbit between the Earth and the Moon. And on that evening, it was going to die. Not break, die. AC.